The air in my grandfather's house was thick with dust and memories, the kind that clung to your skin and made you feel as if you were intruding on a sacred space. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath my feet, echoing the weight of the past that seemed to linger in every corner. I had come here to help my mother, Sarah, sort through the remnants of a life once lived, but I was not prepared for what I would uncover. As I rummaged through the clutter in the dim light, my fingers brushed against something rough and jagged. I knelt down, wiping away layers of dust to reveal a loose floorboard. Curiosity prickled at me as I pried it up, revealing a small, leather-bound diary tucked away beneath it. My heart raced as I pulled it out, feeling the cool, weathered cover against my palms. The diary was old, its edges frayed, and the spine cracked, but it seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it held secrets waiting to be unveiled. I flipped it open, and my breath caught in my throat. The pages were filled with a hurried, almost frantic scrawl. The ink smudged and faded in places. The handwriting was familiar, yet distorted by time and emotion. I recognized it immediately as my grandfather's. As I read, my heart began to race, each word pulling me deeper into a web of mystery. "I cannot keep this hidden any longer," one entry read. "The room is locked. A truth lies within that must not be forgotten. Margaret, she is the key." I felt a shiver run down my spine. Who was Margaret? Why was her name etched into my grandfather's thoughts like a brand? The more I read, the more questions flooded my mind. A locked room, a hidden truth, what could possibly be so significant that it warranted secrecy? "Emily?" I startled at the sound of my mother's voice, snapping the diary shut as if it were a fragile piece of glass. I quickly tucked it under my arm, my heart pounding. I didn't want her to see my excitement or the turmoil brewing inside me. "Yeah, Mom," I called back, forcing a casual tone into my voice. "Can you come help me with these boxes?" she asked. I could hear the weariness in her voice, the weight of nostalgia pressing down on her. I hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the diary, an anchor pulling me toward the past. "Sure, just a minute," I replied, reluctantly setting the diary aside for now. I climbed to my feet, brushing the dust from my jeans, and headed toward the living room where Sarah was sorting through old photographs. "Emily, look at this one," she said, holding up a faded picture of my grandfather as a young man. He was smiling, a carefree grin that seemed so foreign to the man I remembered. I smiled back, but my thoughts were still tangled in the diary's revelations. "Mom, I found something in the attic," I started, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't want to burden her with more memories, especially ones that might stir up painful emotions. "Just some old stuff." Sarah's eyes flitted to mine, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something, fear perhaps, before she returned her gaze to the photograph. "You know, sometimes it's better to let the past stay buried," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Why?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. "What happened that was so terrible?" "It's just, sometimes the truth can hurt more than the lies," she replied, her tone heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Your grandfather had his demons. We all do. It's best if we don't dig them up." But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the cusp of something monumental. As the evening wore on and my mother busied herself with the boxes, I sneaked back to the attic, clutching the diary tightly in my hands. I was determined to uncover the mystery of the locked room. "Mark," I called out, hoping my older brother would be nearby. I had to share this with someone who might understand. He emerged from the shadows of the hallway, his expression a mix of annoyance and curiosity. "What is it, Emily?" he asked, crossing his arms. I could see the tension in his posture, the way he braced himself for whatever I was about to say. "I found this diary in Grandpa's attic," I said, my excitement bubbling over. I opened it to the passage about the locked room and read it aloud. "It mentions a truth that has to be uncovered. Doesn't that sound intriguing?" Mark's brow furrowed as he listened, but his eyes held a flicker of something darker. "You shouldn't be looking into that," he warned, his voice low and serious. "You don't know what you might find." "Exactly. That's why I need to investigate," I insisted, feeling the fire ignite within me. What's behind that locked door? What did Grandpa hide from us? Maybe it's for a reason, he replied, frustration creeping into his tone. You don't know the pain that man caused our family. Why would you want to dig it up? Because it's part of our history, Mark. I shot back. We can't just ignore it. Don't you want to know what really happened? He shook his head, his expression turning pain. Sometimes it's better to forget, he murmured, turning away from me. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. Why was he so resistant? The need to uncover the truth consumed me, but it seemed I was alone in my quest. The next day, I met Clara at our favorite cafe. She was always up for an adventure, and I knew she would be intrigued by my discovery. We settled into a booth by the window, the smell of fresh coffee wafting around us. I found this diary in my grandfather's house. I began, excitement spilling from my lips as I recounted the details of my find. It talks about a locked room and a woman named Margaret. I think there's something big hidden there. Margaret, Clara mused, her brow furrowing in thought. That's an interesting name. What do you think is behind the door? I don't know, but I have to find out, I said, my determination solidifying. Will you help me? Of course. This sounds like a mystery worth solving, she replied, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Let's figure out how to get into that room. As we plotted our next move, I felt a sense of purpose. The allure of the unknown pulled me closer to the locked door, each passing moment intensifying my curiosity. After our coffee, we made our way to my grandfather's house, the sun beginning to dip low in the sky, painting the world in hues of orange and pink. Are you sure about this? Clara asked as we approached the old, creaking door that led to the room. My heart raced as I nodded, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through me. I have to know, I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. I took a deep breath, and together we pushed against the door, the old wood groaning in protest. I could almost feel the anticipation hanging in the air, thick and electric. We fumbled around for a way to unlock it, but our efforts were met with resistance. It felt as if the room was guarding its secrets, unwilling to let us in. Just as despair began to creep in, I remembered the key I had found in the attic along with the diary. Wait, I exclaimed, rummaging through my bag. I pulled out the key, its surface cool against my palm. Clara's eyes widened, and I could sense her excitement mirror my own. Do you think it will fit? She asked, her voice tinged with hope. There's only one way to find out, I said, my heart pounding as I inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click, and I felt a rush of adrenaline as I pushed the door open. The sight before me was breathtaking and haunting all at once. The room was dimly lit, dust motes floating in the air like tiny stars frozen in time. It was as if the past had been preserved within these four walls, untouched and waiting for someone to unearth its secrets. My breath hitched in my throat as I stepped inside, Clara following closely behind. Old furniture lay draped in white sheets, as if the room were holding its breath. The walls were lined with shelves filled with books, their spines cracked and faded. But it was the scattered papers on the desk that caught my eye. Letters, photographs, and remnants of a life that once was. Look at this, Clara said, picking up a photo from the desk. I moved closer, my heart racing as I took in the image. It was a picture of my grandfather, younger than I had ever seen him, standing beside a woman with a radiant smile. Her eyes sparkled with life, and I felt an inexplicable connection to her. Who is she? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, but she looks important, Clara replied, her brow furrowing in concentration. As we continued to sift through the contents of the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the verge of discovering something monumental, something that could change everything I thought I knew about my family. But even as excitement bubbled within me, an undercurrent of dread began to weave its way into my thoughts. What if the truth was more painful than I could bear? What if uncovering these secrets would shatter the sitting at the dinner table? I could feel the tension in the air like a thick fog. My brother Mark had been unusually quiet, pushing his food around his plate in a way that suggested he was lost in thought, or perhaps lost in something darker. I had just found the diary, a dusty relic of our grandfather's past, and I was eager to share my discovery with my family. I had hoped for a warm reaction, maybe even a little excitement, but the moment I mentioned the diary, I could see Mark's demeanor shift. "Emily, I really think you should just leave it alone," he said, his voice low and strained. "The past is best left buried." Buried? But Mark, there's so much we don't know. There's a locked room in the house, and I found references to it in the diary. There's something there that could explain everything. I could feel the urgency in my voice, but it seemed to only deepen his frown. "I don't want to talk about this," he replied sharply, pushing his chair back with a loud scrape against the floor. "You don't understand what you're getting into. You never lived through it like I did." His eyes flashed with a pain that struck me deeply. I had always viewed my brother as strong and steadfast, but in that moment, I saw the cracks in his armor. "What do you mean by that? What did Grandpa do to you?" Mark's jaw clenched. "He wasn't the man you think he was, Em. He caused a lot of hurt to this family. You digging into his past won't change that. It'll only hurt you more." "Then tell me what he did," I pressed, desperation creeping into my tone. "If there's something I need to know, I have a right to know it." He looked away, his shoulders tense, and I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. How could he be so adamant about keeping secrets? "You think that finding out more about him will bring us closure? It won't. It'll just open old wounds." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. But how can we heal if we don't understand the past? Ignoring it won't make it go away, Mark. He stood up abruptly, his chair clattering against the floor. "You're being naive. Some things are better left alone. I won't let you make the same mistakes I did." I could feel the tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, but I fought them back. "Mistakes? What mistakes? Why won't you just talk to me?" "Because it hurts too much." His voice rose, filled with a mix of anger and anguish. "You think this is easy for me? You think I want to relive the pain of our family's history?" I was silent, my heart pounding in my chest. Mark's words echoed in my mind, and a chill ran down my spine. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you," I said softly, trying to bridge the gap that had formed between us. I need to know." He looked at me, his expression softening slightly, but the resolve in his eyes remained. "Just promise me you'll drop it," he said, his tone more pleading than commanding. "Promise me you won't go digging around in that room. It's not worth it." I felt a wave of defiance rise within me. How could I promise to ignore something that felt so significant? "I can't do that, Mark. I have to know what's in there. I found a key in the diary. There's something waiting for me, and I can't just walk away from it." Mark's face twisted in agony, and for a moment, I thought he might shout again. Instead, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts, the clatter of the dinner table echoing in my ears. The next day, I met Clara at our usual cafe, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the sweet aroma of baked goods. I slid into the seat across from her, my mind racing with the events of the previous night. "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost," Clara said, her brow furrowing in concern. "What happened?" I sighed, running my fingers through my hair. It was Mark. He's really resistant to me looking into Grandpa's past. He thinks it'll just open old wounds. Clara leaned in, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "But you found something, right? That diary?" I nodded, feeling the excitement bubble within me again. "Yes, and it mentions a locked room in the house. I think there's something significant in there that could change everything we know about our family." "I say go for it," Clara exclaimed, determination lighting up her face. "What's he so afraid of? Maybe it's time someone uncovered the truth." I hesitated, considering Mark's warning. "But he's so adamant about it. What if he's right? What if it just hurts us more?" "Emily," Clara said, her tone serious, "what if it helps? What if you find answers that make everything clearer?" You can't let fear dictate your choices. Besides, I'll help you. A smile broke through my worries. Really? You'd help me? Of course, she said, her enthusiasm infectious. We'll figure it out together. Mark might have his own secrets he's hiding, and it sounds like we need to uncover those too. With Clara's encouragement, I felt a surge of determination. That night, after our families had settled in, we would sneak back to my grandfather's house and confront the locked room. We would face whatever was behind that door, together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across the sky, Clara and I made our way to the house, our hearts pounding in unison. The air felt charged with anticipation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of something significant. The front door creaked open, the sound echoing in the stillness of the empty house. Everything felt so quiet, almost too quiet. We crept through the narrow hallway, my heart racing as we approached the door that had been shrouded in mystery for so long. "Are you ready?" Clara whispered, glancing at me. I nodded, gripping the key tightly in my hand. As ready as I'll ever be. Taking a deep breath, I inserted the key into the lock. The metal turned with a satisfying click, and I pushed the door open. It groaned in protest, revealing a dark room beyond. My pulse quickened as I stepped inside, the air thick with dust and secrets long forgotten. Once inside, we were greeted by an overwhelming sight. The room was a time capsule, filled with old furniture, yellowed photographs, and stacks of letters that seemed to whisper stories from the past. But what caught my attention most was the eerie silence that enveloped us, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for us to uncover its truths. As Clara moved to examine the items scattered around, I felt an uneasy chill creep up my spine. Something about this room felt wrong, as if it was holding on to memories it wasn't ready to share. I took a hesitant step further into the room, my eyes scanning the walls, the shadows dancing ominously. "Emily, come aqui. Olha isso!"
Clara exclamou, sua voz ecoando na quietude. Eu me virei rapidamente, e lá estava ela, segurando um envelope amarelo, com a caligrafia de alguém que eu não reconhecia.
"What does it say?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper.
Não tenho certeza, mas parece uma carta. Deve ser de alguém importante, ela respondeu, seus olhos brilhando de curiosidade. As palavras do Mark ecoavam na minha mente. Deixe o passado em paz. Mas agora, eu estava aqui, na presença de tudo o que estava escondido, e não havia como voltar atrás.
As dust motes danced lazily in the beams of sunlight that filtered through the grimy window of my grandfather's old house, I knelt down, my fingers brushing against the splintered floorboards, each creak beneath me echoing a memory long buried. It was here, in this forgotten corner, that I made a discovery that would change everything. I had been searching for something, anything, that would connect me to the man whose name had been whispered in my family with a mix of reverence and fear. My grandfather had been a figure of mystery, a man whose past was shrouded in silence. It was as if the very walls of this house held their breath, guarding secrets that had been deemed too painful to share. But I was relentless. I needed to know, and there it was, a diary hidden beneath a loose board. I pulled it out, my heart racing. The leather cover was cracked and faded, and as I opened it, the musty scent of old paper wafted up to greet me. The handwriting inside was a chaotic scrawl, full of smudges and crossouts, as if the writer had been grappling with thoughts too heavy to articulate. My eyes scanned the pages, catching snippets of text that hinted at a deeper story, a locked room, a hidden truth, and a family legacy that had been deliberately obscured. "Emily!" My mother's voice called from the kitchen, breaking my reverie. "Dinner's ready." I quickly tucked the diary under my arm, feeling a sense of urgency wash over me. I had to talk to Mom about this. Maybe she could shed some light on what I had found. As I entered the warm glow of the kitchen, I noticed her smile falter as her eyes landed on the diary. "What's that?" she asked, her tone suddenly wary. "I found it in Grandpa's house. It talks about a locked room and some secrets," I replied, my voice tinged with excitement. "I think it could lead to something important." Her expression shifted, a shadow passing over her features. Emily, some things are better left in the past. You don't want to go digging into what's been buried for so long. Why not? I pressed, frustration bubbling up inside me. What could be so terrible that it has to be hidden? She sighed, her gaze drifting to the window, as if she could see the weight of the past hanging in the air. Your grandfather was a complicated man. There's a reason your father and I never spoke of him much. You might not like what you find. Isn't it my right to know? He's my family, I argued, desperately hoping to break through her apprehension. Just be careful, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I could sense her reluctance, but it only fueled my determination. Later that evening, as I lay in bed, the diary heavy on my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of uncovering something monumental. I needed to explore that locked room, but my brother Mark would likely object. He always had a way of deflecting conversations about our grandfather, often resorting to anger or hurt. The next day, I met Clara at the local cafe. She was my confidant, the one person I trusted to help me navigate these murky waters. I slid the diary across the table, my pulse quickening as I watched her eyes widen in surprise. Wow, Emily, this is incredible. You have to find out what's in that room, Clara exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. I know, but Mark won't let me, I replied, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. He's still holding on to all that pain from our grandfather's past. Maybe he has his own secrets, Clara suggested, raising an eyebrow. You can't let fear stop you. I'll help you get in there, no matter what. Later that night, after another tense family dinner where Mark had shot me a look of warning, Clara and I crept toward my grandfather's house. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the old structure. As we approached the door to the locked room, I felt a mix of dread and excitement. Do you hear that? Clara whispered, her eyes wide with apprehension. I strained my ears, and there it was, a faint rustling sound emanating from behind the door. Maybe it's just the wind, I said, trying to sound nonchalant, but my heart raced. Or maybe it's something else, Clara replied, glancing nervously at the door. With trembling hands, I fished out the old key I had found tucked within the diary's pages. As the key turned in the lock, a sense of foreboding gripped me. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room that felt both foreign and familiar. Stepping inside, I was enveloped by a world frozen in time. Dusty furniture, draped in white sheets, loomed around us like specters from a forgotten past. But what captivated my attention was the array of letters and photographs scattered across a small table in the corner. I felt an almost magnetic pull toward them, as if they were calling out to me. Emily, look at this, Clara exclaimed, holding up a yellowed letter. The handwriting was elegant, but the words were heavy with emotion. My heart raced as I stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. It's a letter from someone named Margaret, I murmured, my breath hitching. She talks about secret meetings and something that could ruin the family's reputation. What did she mean by that? Clara asked, her curiosity piqued. I don't know, but it sounds like there's a scandal lurking in our family's past, I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. As we continued to sift through the contents of the room, I stumbled upon a collection of photographs. My heart sank as I flipped through them, each one revealing a different facet of my grandfather's life. Happy moments, secret gatherings, and then one photo caught my eye. It was a picture of a woman, smiling brightly, but beside her, a man had been deliberately scratched out, his identity erased. Who is this? I wondered aloud, holding up the photo for Clara to see. Maybe it's someone important, she suggested, her brow furrowing in thought. Or someone they wanted to forget, I replied, a chill creeping down my spine. The weight of the discoveries began to settle upon me, intertwining with the unanswered questions that had haunted me. I felt like I was peeling back layers of an onion, each revelation more potent and painful than the last. What else lay hidden in the shadows of my family's history? And why had it all been kept from me? Let's keep looking, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. There has to be more. With renewed determination, we continued our exploration of the room. Each item we uncovered deepening the mystery. I could sense that we were on the threshold of exposing a truth that had been buried for far too long. And as I stood there, surrounded by echoes of the past, I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The legacy of silence was about to shatter, and I was ready to confront whatever lay beyond the locked door. As dust motes danced in the beam of sunlight that filtered through the cracked window, I crouched down, my heart racing, as I pried up a loose floorboard in my grandfather's old house. The creaking would groan in protest, but I was relentless. There, nestled in the darkness, lay an old, leather-bound diary. Its cover was worn, and the edges were frayed, as if it had been touched by time itself. I pulled it out, the weight of it heavy in my hands, and instinctively glanced over my shoulder, half expecting someone to catch me in my moment of discovery. The diary had a musty smell, a scent that felt like history. As I opened it, the pages crinkled, revealing a scrawl that was both beautiful and chaotic. The ink was smudged, and there were numerous crossouts, as if my grandfather had wrestled with his thoughts, trying to cage them within the confines of the pages. My breath hitched when I came across a passage that mentioned a locked room and a hidden truth. I felt a shiver run down my spine. What could be hidden behind that door? What secrets did my family harbor? Emily, my mother, Sarah, called from the kitchen. I quickly closed the diary, tucking it under my arm as I made my way downstairs. She was chopping vegetables, her brow furrowed in concentration. I hesitated, unsure if I should bring up my discovery, but the words spilled out before I could stop them. Mom, I found this diary in the attic. It talks about a locked room and something about a hidden truth. What do you know about it? I watched as her hands paused mid-chop. Her face paled, and for a moment, she looked like a ghost. Emily, some things are better left in the past, she said, her voice tight. Your grandfather had issues. It's best to forget about them. Forget, I echoed, incredulous. How can I forget? This is our family history. Sometimes, she continued, her voice trembling slightly, the past is a burden we carry. You don't need to add to it. She turned back to her chopping, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. The conversation was over, at least for her. I left the kitchen, my mind racing. Why was my mother so adamant about not exploring this? I felt a mixture of anger and determination simmering inside me. I had to know what was behind that door. Later that night, I confided in my brother, Mark, during dinner. I found something in Grandpa's attic, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. A diary that mentions a locked room. Mark's expression soured immediately. Emily, don't go digging into the past. You have no idea what you're getting into. Why not? I pressed, frustration bubbling to the surface. What's so terrible about it? It's our family. Because it hurt us? He snapped back, his eyes flashing. Grandpa was a monster. He caused so much pain. I don't want you to reopen old wounds. Wounds? You mean secrets? I shot back. Maybe it's time we face them instead of hiding. He shook his head, pushing his chair away from the table and standing up abruptly. You don't understand. Just leave it alone, Em. And with that, he stormed out of the room, leaving me to stew in my thoughts. The next day, I met Clara at our usual cafe. I needed her support, someone who would understand my need for answers. As I sipped my coffee, I shared everything I had found in the diary and the heated argument with Mark. Emily, you can't let him control you, Clara said, her eyes bright with excitement. We should try to open the locked room. Maybe there's something important in there. And who knows? Maybe Mark has his own secrets that he's not telling you. Do you really think we could? I asked, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through me. Absolutely, Clara grinned. I'll help you. We'll figure out how to get that door open. That evening, armed with a flashlight and the ancient key I had found in the diary, Clara and I made our way to my grandfather's house. The air was thick with anticipation as we stood before the locked door. My heart raced as I inserted the key. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room that seemed untouched by time. Dust motes floated in the air, and I felt as if I had stepped into a different era. Old furniture draped in white sheets, boxes piled haphazardly, and cobwebs adorned the corners like forgotten memories. I took a step inside, Clara right behind me. As I moved cautiously through the room, I stumbled upon a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. My fingers trembled as EU untied the bundle and began to read. The letters were filled with words of love, longing, and secret meetings. The name Margaret echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. Who was she? I turned to Clara, excitement bubbling inside me. "Look at this," I said, showing her the letters. "They're love letters. What if this Margaret is the key to everything?" Clara's eyes widened as she skimmed through the delicate pages. "This could be huge, Emily. We need to find out who she is. What if your grandfather had a life we never knew about?" We spent hours in that room, sifting through boxes filled with dusty photographs and forgotten memories. Each image told a story, but one photo stood out. A picture of a beautiful woman with a charming smile, next to a man whose face had been scratched out, as if someone wanted to erase him from existence. What happened to him? I wondered aloud, a chill creeping up my spine. "I don't know, but he must have been important," Clara replied, scrutinizing the photo. "We need to know more about Margaret. This whole thing feels like a puzzle waiting to be solved." The next day, we headed to the local archive, eager to dig deeper into my grandfather's past. The musty smell of old paper filled the air as we rifled through newspapers and records. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were unearthing something monumental. "Look at this," Clara exclaimed, pointing to a yellowed newspaper article. "Your grandfather was involved in a protest back in the day. It says here he fought for civil rights. This is incredible." I leaned closer, scanning the words. He was an activist? But why didn't anyone talk about this? Maybe it was part of the legacy he wanted to hide, Clara speculated. I felt a mix of pride and confusion. My grandfather, a fighter for justice. How could that man have been the same person that Mark feared so much? When I returned home, my heart pounded. I had to confront Mark. He needed to know what I discovered. I found him in the living room, staring blankly at the television. "Mark," I began, my voice steady, "we need to talk." He turned to me, eyebrows raised. "About what?" "I told you to drop it. I found out more about Grandpa. He was involved in protests. He fought for civil rights." Mark's face darkened, and I could see the tension coiling in his shoulders. "You shouldn't have gone looking for that. You don't know what you're dealing with. Don't you want to know the truth?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "The truth about our family? Sometimes the truth is more painful than the lie, Emily," he said, his voice cold. "Why are you so afraid?" I pressed, feeling the frustration boil over. "What else are you hiding from me?" His eyes flared with anger, and for a moment, I thought he might explode. "You don't understand. You think you want to know, but you don't." He took a deep breath, his face softening slightly. "Just leave it be, okay? Let the past stay buried." I took a step back, feeling the weight of his words. "You're scared of what we'll find, aren't you?" He looked away, his expression unreadable. "You don't know what you're asking for, Em." And with that, I knew I had to continue my quest for the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight filtering through the aged window, illuminating the forgotten corner of my grandfather's house. It was a place I had visited countless times as a child, but now, standing there as an adult, it felt shrouded in secrets. My fingers brushed against the cool, wooden floorboards, and my curiosity piqued as they grazed over a loose plank. With a gentle tug, the wood creaked and shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Heart racing, I knelt down and pulled out an old, leather-bound diary, its cover worn and cracked. I flipped it open, the musty scent of aged paper wafting into the air. The handwriting was shaky and uneven, ink blurring in places, as if the writer had been overwhelmed by emotion. My eyes scanned the pages, landing on phrases that sent chills down my spine. The locked room and the hidden truth. What truth could be hidden in this house, in the silence that had lingered for generations? Later that day, I rushed to show my mother, Sarah, the diary. She was in the kitchen, her hands busy with dinner preparations, but her smile faded the moment I held the diary out to her. "Mom, look what I found," I exclaimed, excitement bubbling within me. Her gaze flickered from the diary to my face, a shadow crossing her features. "Emily, you shouldn't be looking into things like that," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a whirlwind of emotions. "Why not?" I pressed, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "What's so terrible about this diary? Some things are better left in the past," she replied, her tone clipped, as if sealing the conversation. "Your grandfather was complicated. It's not a story you want to dive into." I sensed a barrier between us, a wall built from years of unspoken words and buried pain. "But Mom, I need to know. There's a locked room, and the diary hints at something important." Sarah sighed, a deep resignation in her breath. "Sometimes, the truth only brings more pain, Emily. Just be careful." That night, I lay awake in bed, the diary resting on my nightstand, its pages whispering secrets I was desperate to uncover. I thought about my brother, Mark, and the way he had looked at me during dinner earlier that week, his eyes filled with unspoken warnings. "You shouldn't mess with the past," he had said, his voice low, filled with a weight that made my heart sink. I could tell he was still haunted by our grandfather's legacy, a legacy that seemed to cast a long shadow over our family. But I was resolute. The locked room felt like a siren call, luring me in with promises of revelations. The next day, I met Clara at our favorite cafe, her usual bright demeanor dimmed by the seriousness of my tone as I recounted my discoveries. "You have to help me, Clara," I urged, leaning across the table. "I need to find that room." She raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. "What's in there that's so important?" "Answers," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think there's something about my grandfather that no one wants to talk about." Clara leaned back, considering my words. "You know, maybe Mark is hiding something too. He seems really stuck on this whole don't dig up the past thing." I nodded, the thought swirling in my mind. "Then we'll show him we aren't afraid." That night, armed with a flashlight and the antique key I had discovered in the diary, Clara and I made our way to my grandfather's house. The air was thick with anticipation as we approached the door to the locked room. My heart pounded in my chest as I inserted the key into the rusty lock. It turned with a reluctant click, and I pushed the door open, revealing a room frozen in time. Dust particles danced in the beam of my flashlight, illuminating a space cluttered with boxes, old furniture, and stacks of letters and photographs. It was as if the world outside had forgotten this place. Clara gasped beside me, her eyes wide with awe. "This is incredible," she breathed, stepping further inside. I began sifting through the letters, their yellowed pages filled with ink that spoke of a lifelong past. One caught my eye, a love letter addressed to a woman named Margaret. My heart raced as I read the words, filled with longing and secrecy. "My dearest Margaret," it began, "I cannot bear the thought of a life without you, yet duty calls me away." "Who was she?" Clara asked, peering over my shoulder. "I don't know," I murmured, my mind racing with possibilities. "But it sounds like their love was forbidden, like it could ruin everything." As I continued to flip through the photographs, one in particular stood out. It showed a group of people at what looked like a family gathering, but there was a figure in the corner, their face obscured as if someone had deliberately scratched it out. My breath caught in my throat. "Clara, look at this," I said, showing her the picture. "Why would someone do that?" She wondered aloud, a frown creasing her forehead. "I don't know, but I need to find out. Who was Margaret? And why was she erased from our family history?" The next day, I was determined to uncover the truth. I shared my findings with Clara again, and together we decided to visit the local archives. There has to be more about Margaret and the scandal mentioned in these letters. I insisted, my curiosity burning bright. As we combed through old newspapers, Clara's eyes widened as she stumbled across an article detailing a protest my grandfather had been involved in. "Emily, look at this. Your grandfather was an activist," she exclaimed, excitement radiating from her. My heart raced as I read the headline. "Local man leads protest for equality." It detailed how my grandfather had fought for causes that seemed so distant from the man I thought I knew. "This changes everything," I said, my mind reeling. Returning home, I felt a surge of determination and dread as I approached Mark. He was in the living room, the weight of his gaze heavy as I recounted my discoveries. "Mark, did you know about Margaret?" I pressed, my heart pounding. He looked at me, his expression a mix of anger and pain. "Drop it, Emily," he snapped. "You don't know what you're getting into. The past is buried for a reason." "Is it? Or is it just hiding from us?" I challenged, my voice rising with emotion. "What happened between our grandfather and Margaret?" Mark's face paled, and for a moment, I thought he might crack under the pressure. "She was a distant relative," he confessed, his voice low. "He loved her, but she was forced to leave. It caused a massive rift in the family." "Why was she forced to leave? What really happened?" I pressed, desperate for the truth. He clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. "You think you want to know, but you don't. It's a legacy of pain, Emily. Just let it go." But I couldn't let it go. I felt like a detective on the brink of a major breakthrough, and the pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to fit together. I had to know more about Margaret and her connection to my grandfather. I made a decision then and there. I would seek out her descendants. If there were any answers to be found, they would be with them. The search took me to a small town several hours away, where I anticipated uncovering the fragments of a life intertwined with my own. But as I drove, the excitement mingled with an undercurrent of anxiety. What if I uncovered something that shattered our family even further? After hours of searching, I found a library that housed old records. I spent days poring over documents, hoping to find a clue that would lead me to Margaret's descendants. And finally, I came across a name that made my heart race. A woman named Lila, listed as a relative of Margaret. I felt a surge of hope. With trembling hands, I dialed the number I had found, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" A voice answered, warm yet cautious. "Is this Lila?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, who is this?" she replied, curiosity piquing. "My name is Emily, and I think I'm related to you through Margaret," I confessed, my stomach twisting with anticipation. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "Margaret? My grandmother spoke about her. What do you want to know?" As I shared my findings, Lila listened intently, and I could sense the weight of history between us. "I've always felt there was more to her story than what was told," Lila said softly. "There were whispers of a scandal, something that forced her to leave." My breath caught in my throat. What happened to her? Did she ever find happiness? Lila hesitated. She loved someone she couldn't be with. Our family kept it quiet, but the truth is, she was heartbroken. After she left, her life didn't turn out as she hoped. It was as if she carried the weight of that love with her. I felt a deep sorrow wash over me. "I'm so sorry," I murmured, grief tangling with empathy. "Emily, it's important to remember that the past can't be changed. Sometimes, it's best to let it rest." The air was thick with tension as Clara and I huddled together in the dim light of my living room, poring over the stacks of papers and old photographs we had gathered over the past few weeks. The walls seemed to close in on us, whispering secrets we could barely comprehend. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, as if the ghosts of my family were lurking just outside the window, waiting for the right moment to intervene. "Emily, are you sure we should keep going?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She fiddled with the edge of a faded newspaper clipping, her brow furrowed in concern. "I mean, ever since we started digging into this, strange things have been happening." I looked up from the table, meeting her eyes. "I know, Clara, but we can't stop now. We're so close to finding the truth. I can feel it. I glanced at the clock on the wall. The tick-tock echoed in the silence, reminding me of the urgency pressing down on us. My family has kept these secrets for too long. Clara sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping. I just don't want you to get hurt. You saw the note left at your door. Whoever it was clearly doesn't want us to find out what happened. I remembered the note all too well. A simple piece of paper folded neatly, the words scrawled in an unsteady hand. Stop digging. You don't want to know. I had shoved it into my pocket, feeling a mix of anger and defiance. That just makes me want to dig deeper. What are they hiding? Clara shook her head, her eyes darting to the window. I don't know, but it feels dangerous. Maybe we should take a break. Talk to someone who knows more about the family history before we go any further. I dismissed her suggestion with a wave of my hand. No, I need to know what happened with my grandfather and Margaret. They can't just silence us forever. I could hear the determination in my voice, and it fueled my resolve. I had to confront the truth no matter the cost. Okay, Clara relented, but let's take a cautious approach. We can go visit that historian in town tomorrow. He might have some insights that could help us understand what we're dealing with. The thought of speaking to someone who might have knowledge about my family's past sent a shiver of excitement through me. That's a good idea. Maybe he can shed some light on the connection between my grandfather and Margaret. As the evening wore on, the shadows in the room seemed to stretch longer, and I could feel an unsettling chill creeping in. Clara and I pored over the photographs again, looking for any clues we might have missed. I picked up one of the faded pictures. A small group of people gathered around my grandfather, their smiles frozen in time. But there was something odd about the image. One person seemed to have been deliberately obscured, their face scratched out. Look at this, I said, holding it up to Clara. Why would someone do that? Who was this person? My heart raced at the thought of yet another hidden truth lurking beneath the surface. Clara leaned in closer, squinting at the image. It's strange, isn't it? It's like they wanted to erase this person from memory. She paused, her expression turning serious. Maybe this person had something to do with the scandal. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What if they were involved with Margaret? What if they were a part of the reason she had to leave? Clara nodded slowly. We need to find out who this person is. They might be the key to understanding everything. Just then, a loud knock shattered the stillness of the room. Clara and I exchanged worried glances, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Who could that be at this hour? I murmured, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know, Clara replied, her voice trembling. I'll check. I followed her to the door, a sense of dread washing over me. As Clara opened the door, I felt a rush of cold air sweep through the room. Standing there was a figure cloaked in shadows, their face hidden beneath a hood. Emily, the figure said, their voice deep and gravelly. We need to talk. My breath caught in my throat. Who are you? I demanded, stepping protectively in front of Clara. The figure hesitated, then stepped forward, revealing a familiar face, the historian we had planned to meet the next day. I'm sorry for the theatrics, he said, pulling back his hood. But it's urgent that we speak now. What do you know about my family? I asked, my curiosity piquing despite the ominous atmosphere. The historian glanced around the room, ensuring we were alone. I know more than you can imagine, Emily. Your family's history is intertwined with this town's dark past. And it's not just about Margaret. Clara and I exchanged glances, my heart racing at the implications. What do you mean? Pressed. He took a deep breath, his eyes serious. There are secrets that have been buried for generations, and they are not just about your grandfather's love life. There are events, tragedies that your family has tried to erase from memory. Events that might put you in danger if you continue digging. I crossed my arms, feeling a mix of frustration and fear. I want to know the truth. If my family has been hiding things, I deserve to know why. He nodded, understanding my resolve. Very well, but you must understand, knowing the truth can be a heavy burden. It may change how you see your family and yourself. Before I could respond, Clara interjected, "What do you mean, change how she sees herself?" The historian looked at her, then back at me. "There are connections, hidden ties that may reveal more about your identity than you expect. You may not be who you think you are." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are you saying? Are you implying I'm not my grandfather's granddaughter?" His expression softened. "Not exactly, but the history of your family is not as straightforward as you've been led to believe. There are layers of relationships, and some of them are tied to the very scandal you are trying to uncover." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. "What do I need to know?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt inside. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I suggest you take a trip to the archives tomorrow. Look for the records of the protests your grandfather participated in. They might lead you to answers about why Margaret disappeared and the family's secrets." "What about the threats?" Clara asked, her voice shaking slightly. "What if someone is watching us?" The historian placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Be careful, but don't let fear stop you. Knowledge is your best armor. But remember, not all truths are meant to be uncovered. Some may lead to more pain." As he turned to leave, I felt a surge of determination. "Thank you," I called after him, my heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. "We will find out the truth." He paused at the door, looking back at me. "Just remember, Emily, the truth can set you free, but it can also bind you in ways you never expected." With that, he disappeared into the night, leaving Clara and me standing in the doorway, both shaken and invigorated. I looked at her, a fire igniting in my chest. "We have to go to the archives. We can't let this go." Clara nodded, though I could see the hesitation in her eyes. "Okay, but let's be careful. I can't shake this feeling that someone is watching us." As we settled back in, the weight of the historian's warning lingered in the air, an unspoken promise of the dangers that lay ahead. I glanced at the photographs scattered across the table, each one holding a piece of the puzzle. Tomorrow would be a new day, a chance to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The air was thick with tension as I paced back and forth in the dimly lit living room, the shadows from the flickering lamp casting an eerie glow on the walls. The ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece seemed to amplify my anxiety, each second dragging out in painful anticipation. I could feel my heart racing, pounding in rhythm with the thoughts swirling in my mind. How could I confront my father about the secrets that had been buried for so long? "Emily," my father's voice broke through my reverie, heavy with a mix of concern and irritation. "You need to stop this. Digging into the past won't change anything." He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression a blend of anger and fear. Mark had always been protective, but this was different. This was about Margaret, about our family's hidden truths. "Dad, how can you say that? I've uncovered so much already. I found letters, photographs, things you never told me about." My voice trembled slightly, but I pushed forward, fueled by determination. "Margaret was important to Grandpa. Why can't you just tell me what happened?" Mark sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, Em. You don't understand the pain that comes with dredging up those memories. It's not just about Margaret. It's about our family's history, and some things are better left alone." "Better left alone? Or are you just scared of what you might find?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You keep saying that the past is painful, but it's not going to go away by ignoring it. If anything, it just festers. I need to know." He stepped closer, the anger in his eyes melting into something softer, a flicker of vulnerability. "You think you want the truth, but the truth can hurt, Emily. You have no idea what you're asking for. Do you really want to know what happened to Margaret? To our family?" "Yes," I almost shouted, driven by a mix of desperation and curiosity. "I need to understand. I need to know why we have this darkness hanging over us. Why you refuse to talk about it." Mark's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of my words had physically drained him. He turned away and stared out the window, the moonlight illuminating his face. "It was a different time," he finally said, his voice low. Margaret was complicated. She was my mother's sister, and their relationship was fraught with secrets. When she fell in love with my father, it tore our family apart. Fell in love? With Grandpa? I was taken aback. But why would that matter? Families fall in love all the time. He shook his head, a bitter smile forming on his lips. Not like this. You don't understand the stigma of it all. The family's reputation was everything back then. When my father chose Margaret, it was a scandal. My mother was heartbroken. They forced Margaret to leave, and she was never spoken of again. It was as if she never existed. Why didn't anyone tell me this? I demanded, my heart racing with the revelations. I had to find out from an old diary. You've kept me in the dark about my own family. I thought I was protecting you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want you to carry the weight of our family's mistakes. I thought if I didn't talk about it, it would just go away. But it hasn't gone away, Dad, I argued. It lingers in the shadows, in every family gathering, every mention of our history. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist. He turned back to me, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. You think it's easy for me? It's not. I've lived with this pain for years, and I don't want you to suffer the same way. His voice cracked, and I could see the hurt etched across his face. I don't want to suffer, I said softly, my anger dissolving into empathy. But I can't keep living in this ignorance. I need to understand who I am, who we are. And if I have to dig into the past to do that, then so be it. Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of acceptance crossing his features. You're right. I can't keep holding you back. But I'm asking you to tread carefully. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. Just tell me what I need to know. I pleaded, the desperation creeping back into my voice. What really happened with Margaret? Why did she have to leave? He hesitated, and for a moment, I feared he might shut me out again. But then he took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice thick with emotion. Margaret was a passionate woman. She believed in causes, in fighting for what was right. When my father got involved in activism, it drew her in. Their love was intense, but it also attracted attention, and not all of it was good. Activism? What kind of activism? I pressed, my curiosity piqued. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Protests, rallies. They were fighting against the social norms of the time. It was dangerous, and it made powerful enemies. My mother didn't approve. She wanted a stable life, not a life of turmoil. When Margaret's relationship with my father came to light, the family was torn apart. I could see how it affected my mother, and I was just a child. I didn't understand then. But you understand now, I said, my heart aching for him. You can't keep hiding from this. It's a part of who we are. He nodded slowly, his gaze distant. I know, but it's easier to pretend. It's easier to forget. I thought if I buried the past deep enough, it would stay buried. But it hasn't, I replied softly. And now it's time to face it. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words and truths that lingered like a dense fog. Finally, Mark spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Margaret's absence left a void in our family. When she was forced to leave, it didn't just affect her. It shattered everything. My mother became bitter, my father distant. We lost the warmth of family. I'm so sorry, Dad, I said, my heart breaking for all the pain he had endured. But we can't let that pain define us. We have to confront it, for our own sake. Mark looked at me, his expression a mixture of fear and hope. You're stronger than I ever was, Emily. I just want you to be careful. If you keep digging, you might uncover things that will change everything. I'm ready for whatever comes next, I assured him, my resolve solidifying. I need to know the truth, even if it hurts. He regarded me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, as if coming to a decision. All right, I'll tell you everything I know about Margaret, but you have to promise me one thing. What's that? I asked, my heart racing with anticipation. Promise me you won't let this consume you. The past is a dark place, and I don't want you to lose yourself in it. I promise, I said, my voice steady. I just need to know who I am. Mark took a deep breath, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of pain and regret. Okay, it all started with a love that was never meant to be, and a family that never accepted it. As he began to share the fragments of our family history, I felt a sense of urgency wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the key to unlocking the mysteries that had haunted my family for generations. But as the shadows of the past loomed larger, I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth might be more than I had bargained for. It felt like the walls of my family home were closing in on me. After all the discoveries I'd made about my grandfather and the secrets he buried, I found myself standing in front of the old, dusty box in the basement, my heart racing. I had just returned from another visit with Clara, where we had pieced together the fragments of my grandfather's life. The weight of the revelations pressed heavily on my chest, and I needed to find answers. As I opened the box, the scent of aged paper and forgotten memories wafted out, mingling with the musty air. Inside, I found an assortment of letters, photographs, and trinkets, remnants of a life that had been meticulously hidden from us. I carefully lifted out a stack of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. My hands trembled as I loosened the knot, revealing the delicate script of my grandfather's handwriting. Each letter felt like a heartbeat echoing through time, whispering secrets waiting to be unveiled. Emily, Mark's voice broke through my concentration, echoing from the top of the stairs. I quickly shoved the letters back into the box and closed the lid, my heart racing. What are you doing down there? Just looking for some old family photos. I called back, trying to sound casual. I didn't want him to know I was digging deeper into our family's past. Not yet. I wanted to be certain of what I was about to uncover. Mark descended the stairs slowly, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. You've been acting strange lately. Are you okay? I forced a smile, though it felt brittle on my lips. I'm fine. Just trying to learn more about Grandpa and our family history. I could see the flicker of discomfort in his eyes as I mentioned our grandfather. It was a name that carried too much weight, too many hidden scars. I don't think that's a good idea, he said cautiously, leaning against the wall. Some things are better left in the past. Why do you say that? I challenged, crossing my arms defensively. Don't you want to know the truth? Truth, he scoffed, shaking his head. The truth can be ugly, Emily, can tear families apart. Sometimes it's best to just forget. I felt a flash of anger rise within me. Forget? You want me to forget about Margaret? The woman who apparently meant so much to him? Or the brother I never knew existed? Each word was a dagger, aimed at the walls he had built around his heart. Enough! Mark shouted, his voice echoing in the small basement. You don't understand what you're getting into. Please, just drop it. Why are you so scared? I demanded, feeling the heat of frustration bubbling over. What are you hiding? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Mark's expression shifted, a blend of pain and desperation. I'm not hiding anything. I want to protect you from the hurt. You think you want to know, but you don't know what you're asking for. Then let me decide for myself. I shot back, my voice rising. I refuse to live in the dark, Mark. I deserve to know who I am and where I come from. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the floor. You really think knowing will make you feel better? That it will change anything? His voice softened, the edge of anger replaced by something more vulnerable. It won't. It will only bring more pain. Maybe pain is part of the truth, I replied, my resolve strengthening. I can't just ignore all of this. I have to know what happened to Margaret, who she was, and what kind of man my grandfather really was. Mark looked away, his gaze landing on the box I had just opened. You think that's the answer? Those letters won't change anything. They won't bring her back. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. I don't want to bring anyone back, Mark. I just want the truth. I need to understand why it was all kept secret, why our family was so afraid of its own history. He sighed deeply, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. "You're right. It's time you knew," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But be careful what you wish for. The past doesn't always stay buried." With a heavy heart, I returned to the box. I could feel his eyes on me, watching as I pulled out the letters again. "I just want to know about Margaret," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "She was a part of this family, and no one ever talks about her." Mark shifted uncomfortably, the tension between us palpable. "I don't know much," he admitted reluctantly. "Just what I've heard through whispers. She was someone who got caught in a bad situation. Grandpa loved her, but it was never supposed to happen." I opened one of the letters, my eyes scanning the elegant script. "What do you mean? What happened?" He hesitated, clearly grappling with his words. "There was a scandal," he finally said. "Margaret was a distant relative, and their love was frowned upon. She had to leave. It broke him, and he buried it all. That's why the room was locked, because he didn't want anyone to know." I felt a pang of sympathy for the man I never truly knew. "But why keep it from us?" I asked, feeling the injustice of it all. "Why not share his story? It could have helped us understand him better." "Because it was shameful," Mark replied, his voice low. "And our family has always been about appearances. We had to present a certain image to the world. His love for Margaret, it didn't fit that image." I shook my head in disbelief. "So he chose to silence it? To erase her from our history?" The thought made my stomach churn. "People do strange things when they're ashamed," Mark said softly, almost to himself. "He thought he was protecting us. But at what cost?" Pressed. "We're living in the shadow of his choices. I refuse to accept that." Mark remained silent, his gaze distant as if he were lost in his own memories. I could see the pain etched on his face, and it made my heart ache. "You need to understand, Emily," he said finally. "Not everything is meant to be understood. Some truths are better left untouched." "Maybe," I replied, my voice steady, "but I can't walk away now. I have to find out who Margaret was, and what really happened." Mark looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of pride and fear. "You're so much like him," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Stubborn and unwilling to back down. Maybe that's what this family needs." I shot back, feeling a surge of determination. Someone to break the cycle of silence. With that, I turned back to the box, my fingers tracing the edges of the letters. I wanted to read them all, to immerse myself in the story of this woman who had been erased from our lives. But as I began to unfold the first letter, a sudden realization struck me. "Wait," I said, my heart racing once more. What if the man in that photo is connected to all of this? What if he's part of Margaret's story?" Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" he asked, confusion evident in his voice. "The photo I found," I explained quickly, my mind racing. "The one with the man whose face was partially erased. What if he's a part of our family too? Maybe he's tied to Margaret in some way." Mark's face paled, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. That's a possibility," he admitted cautiously. "But why would Grandpa hide him? What if he was someone who shouldn't have existed?" The tension in the room rose as we exchanged glances, each of us grappling with the implications of my theory. "I need to find out," I insisted, my determination surging. "This could be the key to everything." Mark sighed heavily, the weight of our families past pressing down on us both. "Just be careful, Emily. The past is a tangled web, and you might not like what you find." "I won't stop," I said resolutely, my eyes shining with conviction. "I owe it to Margaret, to our family's history. I need to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it may be." As I returned to the letters, I felt a mix of fear and excitement coursing through me. I was on the brink of discovering something monumental, something that could change everything I thought I knew about my family. And in that moment, as I held the fragile papers in my hands, I knew I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, no matter the cost. The weight of my discoveries settled heavily in my chest as I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart racing. Mark's revelation about the existence of a lost brother had shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. The air in the room felt thick, almost suffocating, and I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, a reminder that time was slipping away while I remained trapped in the web of my family's secrets. I couldn't shake off the image of that photo I had found in the hidden box in the basement. The man in the picture shared my eyes, the same deep-set gaze that spoke of pain and turmoil. I felt an inexplicable connection to him, and the thought that he was my brother, my flesh and blood, sent chills down my spine. I had to know more. I had to find him. Picking up my phone, I scrolled through my contacts until I found Clara's name. I hesitated for a moment, knowing she had been my steadfast ally in this tumultuous journey. But I needed her now more than ever. I dialed her number, my fingers trembling with anxiety. Emily? Clara's voice was warm, but I could sense the concern lacing her tone. Is everything okay? No, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I need your help. It's about the brother, the one Mark mentioned. There was a pause on the other end. You want to find him, don't you? Yes, I have to know who he was. I have to know what happened to him. My heart raced with urgency as I spoke, the words tumbling out. Can you meet me at the cafe? Of course. I'll be there in 15 minutes. As I hung up, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I couldn't let the shadows of the past consume me, but I also couldn't ignore the call for answers that echoed in my mind. I needed to face whatever lay ahead, no matter how painful. 15 minutes later, I walked into the cafe, the familiar aroma of coffee and baked goods comforting yet disorienting. Clara was already seated at our usual table, her brows furrowed in concentration as she sipped her drink. When she saw me, her face softened, and she gestured for me to sit. I can see it on your face, she said gently. What did Mark tell you? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. He said our grandfather had a son out of wedlock, a brother I never knew about, and he's gone. He died. Clara's eyes widened. That's huge, Emily. Did he say how? I shook my head, feeling a lump form in my throat. No, just that it was a secret, a stain on the family. I need to know more. I need to find out who he was and what happened to him. Okay. Clara leaned forward, her expression resolute. Let's start by doing some research. There might be records or articles about him. We can check the local archives. Really? You do that? I asked, grateful for her unwavering support. Of course, Clara replied with a reassuring smile. We're in this together. After finishing our drinks, we headed to the local archive, a small brick building that held the history of our town within its walls. The musty scent of old paper filled the air as we stepped inside. Rows of shelves towered over us, filled with dusty books, newspapers, and documents. I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This place held the key to unraveling the mystery of my brother's life. Clara and I split up, each diving into the stacks to search for anything related to my family. I sifted through old newspaper clippings, my heart pounding with each potential lead. Come on, I muttered under my breath, scanning the headlines. Emily, Clara called from across the room, her voice breaking through my focus. I rushed over to her side, my pulse quickening at the sight of her wide eyes. I found something, she said, her finger pointing to a faded article. The headline read, Local Activists' Tragic Death Shocks Community. My heart sank as I read the details. This could be about your brother, Clara continued. It mentions a protest he was involved in. Let me see, I urged, leaning closer to the brittle page. The article detailed a protest against a local factory known for its pollution, which had drawn significant attention. It says he was passionate about social issues, fighting for what he believed in. Sounds like he was a lot like your grandfather, Clara noted, her voice laced with curiosity. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride mixed with sorrow. He fought for something he believed in, but what happened to him? Why was he kept a secret? Clara flipped through more pages, her brow furrowing as she searched for additional information. There's got to be more here. Let's keep looking. As the hours passed, I felt a sense of urgency building within me. With each detail we uncovered, the picture of my brother's life began to take shape. But the more we learned, the more questions surfaced. Where had he gone? Why hadn't Mark ever mentioned him before? After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled upon an article that sent a shiver down my spine. "Emily, look at this," Clara said, pointing to a section discussing a tragic incident involving a young man later identified as my brother. "What does it say?" I asked, my voice trembling. Clara read aloud. Witnesses reported that he was found unresponsive in an alley, struggling with substance abuse. The article hints at a troubled past, with family refusing to comment on the situation. Each word felt like a punch to my gut. Substance abuse? I echoed, the reality crashing down around me. Was he fighting his demons like my grandfather? Did the family legacy haunt him too? "I'm so sorry, Emily," Clara said softly, placing a comforting hand on my arm. "This is a lot to process." I pulled away, the weight of the truth pressing heavily on my chest. "I need to know more. I can't just leave it like this. He deserves to have his story told." With a newfound determination, I started searching for any other leads. Names, connections, anything that might help me trace my brother's life. I remembered the call I had received earlier, the woman who claimed to be his wife. It was time to reach out to her, to seek closure for the brother I had never known. "Clara, I think I have to find that woman," I said, my voice steadying with resolve. "She might have answers." "Are you sure? It could be risky," Clara cautioned, her brow furrowing. "I have to do this. I need to understand what happened to him, to know if he suffered alone." I insisted. "Okay, let's find a way to track her down." Clara agreed, her support unwavering. "We'll figure it out together." As we continued our search, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the despair. I was uncovering the pieces of my brother's life, and with each revelation, I felt a deeper connection forming between us. I couldn't let the shadows of the past consume me. I had to face them head-on. The next few days were a blur of research, phone calls, and late-night discussions with Clara. I was relentless in my pursuit of the truth, driven by the need to understand not only my brother's story, but also the legacy that had haunted my family for generations. Then, one afternoon, after hours of searching online and cross-referencing names, I found a potential lead. A social media profile that matched the name of the woman who had called me the wife of my brother. My heart raced as I clicked through her photos, desperate to find a sign that would lead me closer to the truth. "Clara, I think I found her," I exclaimed, pointing at the screen. "Her name is Lisa. Look at her profile. She seems to have a lot of mutual friends from the area." Clara leaned in, her eyes scanning the screen. "We should reach out to her. Send her a message." I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What do I even say? "Hi, I'm Emily. I think I might be your brother's sister. Just be honest. You deserve answers, and so does she," Clara encouraged. With a trembling hand, I typed out a message, laying bare my intentions and the connection I had just discovered. My heart raced as I hit send, and a wave of uncertainty washed over me. Would she respond? Would she even want to talk to me? As the hours turned into days, I felt the weight of anticipation hanging over me. Clara stayed by my side, offering support as we waited for Lisa's reply. But each passing day only deepened the ache of uncertainty in my heart. Finally, just as I was beginning to lose hope, my phone buzzed with a notification. My heart jumped as I saw Lisa's name light up the screen. "Clara," she replied, I exclaimed, my voice a mix of excitement and anxiety. "What did she say?" Clara leaned closer, her expression eager. I opened the message, my fingers shaking as I read. "Hi, Emily. I don't know how to respond to this, but I'd like to meet. There's so much to discuss." "Wow, she's open to it," Clara said, grinning. "When do you want to meet?" I looked back at the weight of the past pressed heavily on my chest as I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart racing from the revelations that had unraveled over the last few weeks. I stared at the diary on my nightstand, the pages yellowed and frayed, each word a haunting reminder of the secrets that had woven themselves into the fabric of my family. How had I not seen it before? How had I not questioned who I was, who we were, until now? The phone rang, piercing through my thoughts like a siren. I snatched it up, hoping for a distraction, but the voice on the other end shattered my already fragile composure. "Emily?" a woman said, her voice trembling, filled with a mix of urgency and sorrow. "I don't know how to say this, but I'm the wife of your brother." I felt my breath hitch in my throat. "My brother? I don't have a brother." "Yes, you do. He was your father's son, born out of a secret that was buried deep in your family's past. His name was David." I could barely process the words. "David?" "Yes, he passed away a few years ago. It was tragic. He struggled with a lot of demons, Emily. I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this." "Demons?" I whispered, feeling the walls of my room closing in on me. I could hardly breathe. "What do you mean?" "He was haunted by the legacy of your family, the secrets, the lies. It consumed him, just like it's consuming you." I could hear the sorrow in her voice, but all I could think about was the weight of the truth that had just been laid bare before me. My father had a brother, one who had lived in the shadows, a stain on the family tapestry that had been meticulously woven together over generations. I felt a mix of anger and grief bubbling inside me. Why hadn't anyone ever mentioned him? Why didn't anyone tell me? I managed to choke out. Why was he a secret? She sighed deeply, the sound echoing through the phone as if it were the sound of her own heart breaking. "Because your family was ashamed. David, he struggled with addiction after he found out about the truth. They wanted to protect their reputation, but in doing so, they hurt him beyond measure. He didn't know how to escape the legacy he was born into." My mind flashed back to the conversations I had had with my father, the way he had skirted around the truth, the way he had warned me to stay away from the past. "Do you know how he died?" "The overdose," she said softly, the words hanging in the air like a death knell. "He fought so hard to break free, but it was like he was trapped in a cage built by your family's secrets." I felt tears streaming down my face, each drop a testament to the pain that had been hidden from me for so long. "I didn't even know he existed. I never got to know him." "I know, and I wish you had. He would have wanted to know you. He spoke of you often, even when he was in the grips of his addiction. He loved you, even from a distance." The enormity of that statement washed over me, and I felt a part of me that had been hidden for so long begin to awaken. "What do I do now?" I whispered, my voice barely above a murmur. "Find the truth, Emily," she urged. "Learn who he was, who you are. Don't let the past dictate your future." I hung up the phone, my fingers trembling as I set it down. The room felt darker now, shadows creeping into the corners, whispering secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. I looked at the diary again, a sense of dread washing over me. The more I delved into my family's history, the more I realized how deeply intertwined it was with tragedy and despair. Suddenly, there was humble knock at the door, and I found Clara standing there, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. "Emily, I heard you on the phone. You look like you've seen a ghost." I wiped my tears hastily, trying to compose myself. It's about my brother, Clara. He died. He was an addict. His name was David." Clara's eyes widened, and she stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "Oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm so sorry." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why was he a secret? "Some families," she began, but I cut her off. "Some families hide the truth to protect themselves. But look what it's done to us. Look what it's done to me." My voice cracked, the anger spilling out like a dam breaking. "I've spent my whole life not knowing who I am, who my family really is. It's suffocating." Clara stepped closer, her eyes softening as she reached for my hand. I'm here for you, Emily. Whatever you need to do, whatever you need to find out, I'll help you. Thank you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But I don't know if I can handle this. The truth, it feels like a weight I can't bear. It's okay to feel that way, she said gently, but running away from it won't make it disappear. You have to face it. I nodded, the reality of her words sinking in. I just thought that finding the truth would bring me peace. Instead, it's like I've opened Pandora's box. Clara squeezed my hand reassuringly. You're stronger than you think, Emily, and I'll be right here by your side. We can look into David's life together. Maybe there's something in there that can help you understand more about yourself. I don't know if I'm ready for that, I admitted, feeling the tears welling up again. What if it only brings more pain? Then we'll deal with it, she said firmly. You're not alone in this. As we sat together, the silence thick and heavy, I realized that the weight of the secrets was not just mine to carry. Clara's support felt like a lifeline, a reminder that I didn't have to navigate this storm alone. But even with her by my side, the fear of what lay ahead loomed like a dark cloud, ready to engulf me at any moment. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I need to know who David was. I need to understand why he was a secret and what that means for me. Clara nodded, determination etched on her face. Let's start digging. We can look for records, talk to people who knew him. I'm sure there are stories out there waiting to be uncovered. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but I need to prepare myself for what we might find. You will, she assured me. We'll take it one step at a time. But even as I agreed, a sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. I knew the truth could be more painful than I could ever imagine, but I could no longer shy away from it. The legacy of my family was tangled in a web of lies, and the only way to break free was to confront it head-on, even if it meant losing a part of myself in the process. As Clara and I made plans to begin our search, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the precipice of something monumental. I had spent my life running from the shadows of my family's history, but now I was ready to face them, no matter the cost. I picked up the diary and traced my fingers over the faded ink, every word a reminder of the silence that had surrounded my family for far too long. The light outside my window began to fade, casting a golden hue across the room. It felt like a final farewell to the innocence I had clung to for so long. As I looked at Clara, I realized the journey ahead would not just be about unearthing the past, but about finding my place within it. With a resolve I had never felt before, I opened the diary once more, ready to uncover the truth within its pages, even if it meant being swallowed whole by the darkness that lingered just beneath the surface. And as I did, I knew that the legacy of silence would finally be shattered, one painful truth at a time.